Good morning, everyone.
He is Professor Amit Sinha. He is the head of Information Technology Department
Good morning,
in
sir. Good
in our
Good
morning.
college.
morning. Hi there.
How are you?
Good morning, Hinchey sir. Myself, Dr. Rikesh Singh at IT department here, ABS Engineering
Good
College.
morning.
Good
Good
morning,
morning.
sir.
Good to meet you.
Thank you.
How is the weather over there, Professor Inchi?
It's been extremely cold, -7, -8 degrees, and we normally never go below freezing, so it's very cold.
Oh,
A little
and what
bit of
about
snow.
okay? And what is the condition of the COVID over there?
Quite bad. Quite bad. It's getting quite serious. So we have lockdown here, and they're saying until the end of January, but to be prepared until the end of March.
Oh, so
So it's pretty serious.
your university is also going through an online mode.
I have not been allowed into my office since last March.
Oh,
So all the
So
classes are
we're
going through online mode.
everything is online. Classes actually start in 2 weeks' time, but everything is online except those that have to be on campus. That that require labs and things. But basically, as much as possible is online. It's quite strange.
So when you return from US,
I got back here in October, so
oh,
I've been here a while.
and when you are
Just
flying
in time
again,
for lockdown. Oh,
so
I
when
have
you are flying
no
again,
plans to. I have no plans to fly again. We are not allowed to go more than 5 kilometers from home.
oh, and
Yeah,
what about
so
your
it's
plant
it's
coming to
very
India in
strange.
the month of Feb?
Not going to happen, I don't think. I cannot see it happening unless there's suddenly big improvements in the situation here. But it doesn't look good.
No.
I think everything's going to be online anyway. So unfortunately,
So it's 5:30 in the morning over there.
4:45.
4:45. It's too early, right?
It's a little bit early. It's a little bit
Little
early.
bit.
Or late, depending on your viewpoint.
So now you are taking, you can say you are in a relaxed mode, not traveling a lot.
Not
This
traveling much, no.
this COVID give you a time to spend for yourself, right?
A bit more time, that is true. That is true. It's strange not traveling, though.
Yes,
I'm getting used to it.
that's true.
Yeah.
Amit sir, can we start or we have to wait?
uh,
Absolutely,
just
whenever you're ready.
in next 2 minutes we are going to start.
Right.
Okay.
So this February we are not going to meet Professor Enchi, right?
I don't think maybe later in the year, but this early, no. At this point, I don't think anything is going to. I don't think there's going to be any travel for me before April. I don't think, and maybe much later than April.
And what about the
Unfortunately,
vaccine that has been introduced by the UK government?
well, we have it here also. We have a different vaccine here because we have the EU vaccine, but they've started to give it to people, but it's only just started, so it's very early stages.
And what about the side effect, whether people are facing it or not?
I've heard of a few people being sick, but I think that's to be expected. But I haven't heard anything serious. But I don't know anyone who's personally who's had it yet, so it's hard to tell. You know, it's a strange situation.
Still yet many results is expected, right?
Yes, yes, but
And whether this
it's
vaccine is applicable for the new strain, what they have, what you have received? No.
they're saying that it should be fine for the new variants. It shouldn't be a problem, but I guess we'll only know when we see it working, right? Yeah, it's
You never know what actually works right now because it is totally, this COVID is totally unpredictable.
yes, and they're now discovering what I've been telling people all along, and people have not been listening, is that it's not a matter of giving people a vaccine once. We're going to have to give people a vaccine every year. So
Now this new vaccine will be introduced into our daily life.
yeah, exactly. It'll be standard every year for everybody. Unfortunately.
Basically, the booster dose we have to take every year.
Yeah.
I think Dr. Kanika is ready. Kanika,
Okay. Yeah, sir. We can start, please.
Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Kanika ji,
So,
can
shall we
you please
start?
switch on your camera?
So my camera is on.
Done.
So
So I think we
good
can start.
morning, all of you. Yes, sir. Good morning, all of you. Respected Professor Mike Hinchey, our Honorable Chief Guest and Keynote Speaker, Dr. Amit Sinha, Head IT Department and Convener, Anish Gupta, FDP Coordinator, participants from the different colleges affiliated to the Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Technical University across the states, faculty members and dear students. On behalf of ABS Engineering College, Ghaziabad and IT Department, I, Dr. Kanika Gupta, feel privileged to welcome you all in 5 days FDP on machine learning, starting from today till 15th of January 2021. The FDP is sponsored and funded by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Technical University, Lucknow. Well, William R. Inge once said, the aim of the education is the knowledge, not of the fact but for the values. It is on occasion like this we get the opportunities to test our knowledge and understand. So we look forward to get an exposure about what the best of their brains think about this emerging technology. The objective of this program is to sensitize the participants about the machine learning, which is a core sub area of artificial intelligence, and it learns from the experience of humans. When exposed to new data, these applications learn, grow, change, and develop by themselves. In other words, with machine learning, computers find the insightful information without being told where to look. So instead, they do this by leveraging the algorithms that learn from data in an iterative process. So while the concept of machine learning has been around for a long time, the ability to automate the application of complex mathematical calculations on the big data. So to start with the event, in an Indian tradition, we would like to invoke Ma Saraswati to shower her blessings on us. So I request our dear student to please present the Saraswati Vandana in awe of her. Please, Pragati, proceed.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good morning to all the respected authorities present over here. Now I'm going to present Saraswati Vandana before you. Ma Saraswati Sharade, Ma Saraswati Sharade, पूर्ण इस अज्ञान उद्धति, पूर्ण इस अज्ञान उद्धति, वीणा पानी तार दे, तार दे, तार दे, माँ सरस्वती शारदे, माँ सरस्वती शारदे, सूर्य ब्रह्म शिव विष्णु गजानन, सूर्य ब्रह्म शिव विष्णु गजानन, जिन चरणों को सेवते हम शिशु है अज्ञानी माता, हम शिशु है अज्ञानी माता, इन चरणों का प्यार दे, माँ सरस्वती शारदे, माँ सरस्वती शारदे. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pragati. So now I request FDP coordinator, Professor Anish Gupta, to give the insight into 5 days FDP. So please.
Thank you, Ms. Kanika. Thank you so much. And good morning to all. I will like to welcome all the speakers, guests, and directors, sir, and the management of ABS Engineering College in this 5 days FDP on machine learning. This FDP, as already told by Dr. Kanika, is technically sponsored by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Technical University, Lucknow. In this 5 days FDP, we will be having 14 technical sessions from the renowned academicians across the globe. Though we have a limitations of having only 100 participants as per the university guidelines, but we can proudly say that we are able to have these number of registration within the 5 days of the registration process what we started. During this FDP, there are certain rules and the guidelines which has been issued by the university that each and every participant should have at least 80% of the attendance and they should score at least 60% of the marks in the quiz what we are going to conduct on the last day after the last session. This quiz will be on the basis of the content which will be delivered within these 5 days by the 14 academicians. For identifying the quality of the FDP, or you can say your area of the interest, we have also a feedback process which is to be followed as per the university guidelines. This feedback is to be given on each and every session. This link will be shared with you on Microsoft Teams just after the session of this FDP. I will also like to especially thank Professor Hinchey, who is one of the renowned academician from the globe, who is one of the renowned scientists of NASA, whose work is remarkable and unmatchable, who has accepted our invitation to be the part of this FDP as a keynote in a short duration of time. I will also like to thank the management of ABS Engineering College, Professor Dr. Salesh Tiwari ji, who is the director of the ABS Engineering College, Professor Amit Sinha ji, who is the head of the IT department, who has continuously guide, support and motivate each and every faculty of this organization to hold this 5 days FDP. At last, I will also like to welcome you all for making this FDP. Truly believe that this will be the huge success by your participation, and I will like to welcome you all on behalf of ABS EC family. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. So all faculty members of Department of IT have been motivated towards our development and student learning through the constant guidance and regular affiliation of our head of department with us. So now I request head of department IT, Professor Amit Sinha, to tell us about the insights of IT department. Please, sir.
Thanks, Dr. Kanika and Dr. Anish for their introduction and organizing this FDP. I, Dr. Amit Sinha, Head of Department of Information Technology, welcome you all in 5 days FDP on machine learning. First of all, I welcome Professor Mike Hinchey, who is an expert in his field and has given his consent to be the part of the inaugural session. It will be a great learning for all the participants to listen you, sir. I welcome Professor Dr. Salesh Tiwari, the Director of EBS Engineering College, Ghaziabad. The conduction of this FDP is possible only because of your able guidance and supervision at every step. Thank you, sir, for your motivation and encouragement in every area of academics. It is my privilege to introduce the Department of IT. The Department of IT at ABES Engineering College, Ghaziabad was established in the year 2000. It runs NBA accredited BTech IT programs with current student intake of 180. We have one of the best results and placements of the students among all AKTU colleges. We promote R&D activities, publications, and adaptability with emerging technologies in the guidance of Honorable Director, sir. The university has given us the responsibility to conduct this FDP, and we tried our best to deliver it. I welcome all the participants and organizers for their immediate registration and support. In parallel, I request them and hope they will attend all sessions with full participation and learning. The topics mentioned in the FDP and their delivery by eminent speakers across the globe will surely benefit to the ultimate recipients, that is our students. Thanks all again. Best of luck. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for your words of wisdom, as you always helped us and guided us in the best possible manner. Thank you, sir. So now it's our pleasure to introduce our chief guest and Professor Mike Hinchey. Professor Mike Hinchey studied at the University of Limerick as an undergraduate and postgraduate from the Oxford University and PhD from the Cambridge University. Professor Mike Hinchey is the president of IFIP, that is the Federation for the Information Processing, and it is a former director of LERO and professor of software engineering at the University of Limerick. He was also the previously worked as a director of the software. There are several awards to his name, and his contribution into the academics and research is also recognized by NASA. He has been awarded with the 2012 NASA Honor Award and NASA Patent Award. Then in 2009, he has been awarded with the NASA Curley Award. Then in 2009, he has been again awarded with the NASA Patent Award. So I welcome you, sir. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you for this, the inaugural of your 5-day faculty development program. I know you're going to learn a lot. I know you're going to find out a lot of very interesting information, exciting information about all sorts of things. So thank you again for the invitation to join you, and in particular to my good friend, Dr. Anish Gupta. As I told him already today, I can never refuse him. So again, today is the start of your 5-day, and I hear 14 sessions on various aspects of machine learning, of course, which is a very specialized area of artificial intelligence. And we see the applications of machine intelligence in all sorts of things. For example, in transportation, typically we would have met in person today, and all of us would have used transport of some sort. In my case, I would have had to use trains and planes. Even using bicycles and scooters nowadays is based on machine learning and artificial intelligence, with various cities renting out these facilities to people around the world. I have a colleague who's convinced that machine learning will get rid of traffic lights. I live 217 kilometers from Dublin Airport. There is one set of traffic lights between my house and the airport, and it's at the end of my street. My colleague is absolutely convinced that we will have enough intelligence in our cars, we'll have enough learning in our cars that they'll all be able to talk to each other, and the need for traffic lights will be done away with. And as you've already heard, I've spent roughly half of my career in academia and half working with NASA as director of the software engineering lab. And so we've been working on using AI and machine learning in various aspects, not least of in missions to go back to the moon and ultimately onto Mars. And of course, you've heard a lot about these in the last few months and the last couple of years because of new plans to advance space exploration and, of course, recent successes in space exploration with private companies. In this picture here, you see what is now known as Artemis, was originally called Constellation, and the launcher itself is Orion. This was to be the largest software project in history. It was estimated to cost about $8 billion US. That now has been changed a lot. I couldn't tell you possibly what the current estimate for software is, but this is a mission that will be changed and enhanced and ultimately will be going back to the moon and onto Mars, possibly as early as 2024. We're used to seeing artificial intelligence and machine learning used in all sorts of production. In essentially, Industry 4.0 is already upon us, and we're living in a world where Industry 4.0 is key, and all manufacturing will use forms of artificial intelligence and machine learning. We see it used in power generation and, of course, in telecommunications and improving our telecommunications. And this year, unfortunately, in the past year, we've had a greater focus, of course, on healthcare and on diagnosis. And we see how AI and machine learning can be outstanding in identifying diseases, identifying problems such as cancer, of course, identifying things like COVID, where we see the diagnosis being much more efficient thanks to the use of machine learning, and that machine learning can look at results of tests and produce results and diagnoses far faster than a human being can and far more accurately than a human being can. If you have one of these devices in your pocket, of course, you're used to seeing machine learning being used all the time in the various apps that you're using on your phone. The phone itself uses machine intelligence and machine learning to do things like preserve your battery, to download upgrades to the software. all of the apps do this too. And of course, many of the apps use your location and where you're currently based to adapt the technology to suit you better, to change the way the apps function and to change the functionality that they give you at a particular point in time, depending on where you are and what your circumstances are. And of course, many of the apps can even tell that you're driving a car, that you're in a car, that you're close to your home, etc. All because they're using your location, but then they're building on top of this using machine learning. We've seen the use of apps and all sorts of software in the transfer of funds between banks for online shopping, etc. And of course, all of this uses techniques from AI and from machine learning. But this, of course, also opens us up to the possibilities of problems when it comes to transactions online, when it comes to fund transfer, etc. You may have seen a hack a few months ago into the accounts of the Twitter accounts of various prominent celebrities, politicians, actors, and so on, where they claimed that if you sent them $1,000 in Bitcoin, they would send you back $2,000. Of course, this was a con. This was a trick. This was because their accounts were hacked. Unfortunately, some people believe this to be true, but hopefully those people who were fooled by this posting and the postings like this were also unable to actually send the Bitcoin because they didn't know enough about technology. But certainly there were people who were taken advantage of. So this, we have to remember that all technology can be used for good, but it can also be used for ill. And in this case, people could certainly be exploited and made use of because the technology is unknown to them, and the technology is being used by actors who want to see people exploited. But we are certainly in a situation where we're living in a cyber-physical social system. And I call it a cyber-physical social system because we are dealing so much with software, and there is software in just about everything we do. And software is the basis of all of AI and all of machine learning. Without software, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. It is software that gives us the flexibility, that gives us the ability to change, and gives us the understanding. But we're dealing with the physical world, and the physical world means that we're changing things based on values we receive to various sensors. We're changing how we behave in our lives, and we are adapting to the fact that all of this is shared with society. How many people tell everything about what they're doing, give everything about where they are and their personal information on various social media sites to all sorts of people, to their friends, of course, but to all sorts of people that they don't know. And these people are using that information to track them, to identify them, to sell them things, which is fine, but also to exploit them in some circumstances. But we do see the world as becoming this great big cyber physical social system where everything interacts, cars talk to each other, intelligent highways track where our cars are. As I mentioned before, we'll get rid of traffic lights and our cars will be able to drive by themselves predominantly. Our medical records will be available everywhere. We'll be able to be taken care of no matter where we are. We won't have to be able to contact our health providers. All the information will be available there to them because everything is available online and everything is interconnected, giving us this great big cyber-physical social system. So we see, of course, the great advantages of AI and machine learning in promoting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These are 17 goals that the United Nations has for transforming our world by the end of 2030. It has 169 separate actions and I think about 232 measurement points to see that we are advancing these goals to improve society. And all of this will be achieved using software, using artificial intelligence, and using machine learning. So I'm sure you're familiar with them, but just to remind you, it's to achieve no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, and partnerships for the goals. Well, there's a few of these where you may have to think a little bit about how machine learning can play a role, for example, in peace and justice, but it can, because machine learning is being used, for example, in making court decisions. Some people think that this is a great idea. Other people are worried about the bias that can be introduced into machine learning algorithms. We can see more easily how machine learning could be used for something like decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, infrastructure. It's less obvious how it contributes to no poverty and zero hunger, but it does in the long run because it improves agriculture, it improves production, it improves transportation, and all of these ultimately contribute to the various sustainable development goals. So just because we don't address each of them directly doesn't mean that we don't impact each of them because of our commitment to AI and to machine learning. The UN has what it calls the SDG Pulse, and so the SDG Pulse is concerned with the specific of the 17 directions that the United Nations wants to pursue, and it highlights those that are a priority for a given year. And this Pulse is published in July of each year. So the version published in July 2020, strangely enough, emphasizes zero hunger, decent working conditions, industry innovation, reduced inequalities, responsible consumption, and of course peace, justice, and the partnerships. It says nothing about health. It says nothing about the coronavirus. This is perhaps strange, but of course these goals were set in advance of the coronavirus. But we do have just until the end of 2030 to try to achieve all of these goals, all of these aims of the United Nations and the Sustainable Development Goals. So again, this year they are focusing on these 7 areas of the 17, but we did not see healthcare become one of those. So good health and well-being is of course essential this year, and the UN defines that as using health monitoring via emerging technologies, remote contact diagnosis and treatment, population and disease monitoring, which in itself is preparation for disease outbreaks, identifying symptoms, following treatment protocols, and remote diagnostics, and helping to analyze trends, make projections about disease outbreaks, the health service usage, and patient knowledge, attitudes, and practices. And of course, all of this is exactly what we can use machine learning for. So we can see that machine learning has a major role to play in good health and well-being, even before the coronavirus came about. But now with the need to track people, to need to identify who might be affected because of their interactions, we're using devices like our smartphones to be able to identify who has met with who has been in close contact with who, etc. The British version of this track and trace system just did not work. It was a complete failure. It just failed to roll out the right software. It failed to identify those people who might be at risk. It failed to identify those people who might have issues and might become victims of the coronavirus. While the British version did not work, the English version did not work, the Irish version was highly successful. We had about 23% of the population sign up to use the tracker within the first 24 hours. By contrast, France, they had about 2.5% of the population sign up in the first week, and within the next week, about 80% of those all deinstalled that application. So the fact that people were using the app was absolutely essential, that people downloaded the app, and then that app was the basis of the machine learning that would be used to identify those that were at risk. So as a result, the Irish COVID tracker has now been used in many other countries, has been made open source and available, and that is helping to track down people who are at risk, all of course using machine learning to identify those people. So again, the 7 specific sustainable development goals that are at the basis of this year's Pulse do not include directly healthcare, but healthcare, of course, relies so much on machine learning. So again, you heard that I worked for a long period of time for NASA, 15 years, in fact, as the director of the Software Engineering Laboratory. Been working in the area of space exploration, and we've been using swarm technologies. The idea behind swarm technologies is that we're inspired or influenced by ideas from swarms of bees, flocks of birds, and colonies of ants. We don't copy them directly, but we're inspired by them. And swarm technologies have been used in a number of areas in the past, for example, for drug discovery. I have a colleague who works for Johnson & Johnson, and he tells me that swarm technologies have reduced drug discovery time from about 17 years down to about 3 years. They're widely used in communication systems for video on demand and related areas. For environmental monitoring, looking at our water, our lakes, our rivers, our oceans. People tend to forget that NASA focuses a lot of its expenditure on the Earth. So NASA spends about half of its budget looking at the Earth and not just at space. And the idea, of course, is to improve the Earth and the environment for all of us, and in particular for exploration. So we can also use these swarm technologies, not just for exploring space, as I'm going to talk about, but also for exploring under the water, under the Earth, rocks, minerals, etc. So I already mentioned how we might use the future technologies, machine learning, etc., in going to the moon and ultimately onto Mars and to other planets. But we're trying to use the idea of small swarm technologies is that we can use a number of smaller spacecraft instead of one large spacecraft. And the idea is that by having a number of smaller spacecraft, we have better use of solar power. And solar power is a big issue because most batteries have memory loss. So we need to use solar power to exploit the ability to go into space with smaller batteries, less batteries, but batteries that don't last as long. So we want to use solar power for charging. We want to be able to send smaller spacecraft into places where larger spacecraft just couldn't go. And in particular, we want to be able to coordinate on more complex tasks. So, for example, taking an X-ray of something requires that we have devices at opposite sides of that item, whether it's a rock, a planet, whatever else. In this case, we're talking about the asteroid belt, so we're talking about taking X-rays of asteroids. And this gives us a much greater accuracy and flexibility, and importantly, it gives us a degree of resilience in space, that damage to one spacecraft will not mean the loss of the entire mission. So that is why we're focusing on using swarms. So the idea is, instead of one large spacecraft, such as for going to the moon, to send a small number of small devices, or potentially even a large number of small devices. So for about 30 years now, we've been working on the Autonomous Nanotechnology Swarm, or ANTS, and the idea is to send 3 submissions to space, one to the moon and the Martian surface. It's called LARA, and the idea is to send spacecraft. And when I say spacecraft, I mean anything from a small device like a miniature space shuttle to a robot like the Mars rovers, or even a satellite, anything that flies in space. So we want to go to the surface of the moon and Mars, and the devices then could collect in a day the same amount of data as the Mars rovers have collected in their entire time on Mars. We want to go to the rings of Saturn to understand those better, and that's a submission called SARA. And the more complex one, and the one that therefore I use for most of my examples, is the Prospecting Asteroid Mission, or PAM, which is to go to the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter and to collect information about the asteroids. And this has gained impetus in the last few years because NASA has stated its desire to put a human being on an asteroid. So the sort of devices we're using are something like this. Each of these nodes is a computer, and control in this device, Tet Walker as we call it, works by transferring control from one node to another. And as a result, it moves by falling over. So you can see that it can go over rough terrain like rocks and craters. It can expand out and contract down. And we can connect multiple of these together to make something like a caterpillar or a centipede. And that, of course, then can carry materials or even other rockets or spacecraft. So that's just an animation, but we do have the real thing. So here you can see it falling over. This particular device can contract down to be a 30 centimeter cube. It can expand out to be roughly 2 meters tall, and it can climb the outside of the 5-story building. And we do actually have a fake Martian surface to test it on, but it's quite interesting when visitors come to the building and they see this moving down the corridor. You get quite a shock. So the PAM submission of ANS is to go to the asteroid belt. So the plan is to launch 1,000 spacecraft from a single large spacecraft that goes to L1, which is the Earth-Moon Lagrangian point. And from there, the 1,000 small spacecraft are launched purely by gravity. So they're pulled by gravity into the asteroid belt. It takes them about 2.5 years to get there, but they're using no power, just pull of gravity. When they get to the asteroid belt, they'll form themselves into a number of subgroups, and the subgroups will then collect various types of information about the asteroids. They'll coordinate between themselves. They'll identify a ruler or to coordinate the small group of roughly 10 spacecraft, and messengers will send data back to Earth. And you'll notice that this arrow here, number 5, is only unidirectional. So there is no data, no messages coming from Earth back out to these devices. They're just sending data back to Earth. And the reason for this is that this mission is so far in space, there is a 40-minute round trip delay. So even if we knew there was a problem and could send a message straight back to Earth, even if Earth could resolve that issue immediately and send instructions back, there would have been a 40-minute delay. So sending a message, I'm about to hit an asteroid, is no good, because by the time the instructions come back, the entire mission is lost. So we anticipate losing 60 to 70% of the small spacecraft because they collide with each other, they collide with asteroids, etc. So when we do lose devices, we can no longer use their small cameras, X-ray devices, etc. to collect data. That's when machine learning comes in, and these devices have to understand their new roles, change their roles, and then become something else. So if we send something with, for example, a camera, and the camera is no longer working, then perhaps that device can become a messenger and aid with sending data back to Earth. We also have to be able to identify which of these asteroids are going to be interesting, which of these are going to have the sort of data that we want. Again, this is going to use machine learning. And lastly, we have the issue of solar storms. So the sun is a star, and all stars have stardust, which sounds very romantic, but basically it's space junk. And so the sun ejects this junk and ejects radiation on a regular basis when it has what we call a solar storm. The good news is that we get to know roughly 24 hours in advance of a solar storm, and then each of these devices can adapt its role. So again, it uses machine learning to understand that the storm is coming and it needs to put itself in a protection mode, which basically is putting itself into a sleep mode. And then when the storm has passed, which is typically within about 24 hours, then they can open up and begin working again. So again, you can see the machine learning aspect to how it changes its role and how it protects itself while it remains working in space, pretty much untended. So we can see what's happening, we can monitor what's happening, but we really don't have control because it is so far away. So this has gotten a lot of information, a lot of interest from a number of websites and a number of publications. So New Scientist took a lot of interest in this and portrayed a number of articles about this mission. The Times of London gave us a full page regarding the work we were doing on self-sacrificing spacecraft. So this is spacecraft that would give up their role because they're damaged, and they might be able to give benefit to the mission even though they themselves cannot continue to perform their role. And again, machine learning would be used in this. My mother got her first patent out of this at the age of 81. I overheard her talking to one of her friends on the telephone and telling her what I did, and I thought, this is not what I do at all. But when I thought about what she'd been talking about, with little adaptation, we were able to use it and we were able to patent it. So she got her first patent, as I say, at 81, and the patents have been licensed to NASA and are actually being used in this technology and in the ANTS mission. So we've been contributing in a number of areas. We've been using formal methods, autonomic computing, software product lines, and automatic code generation. So just to mention these to you quickly, we've been looking at how we can design these sort of systems, how we can specify the range of decisions that a system can make about itself. So this is how we constrain machine learning, that the machine learning, of course, is advantageous to us, but we don't let it make decisions that will be detrimental to the mission. And in fact, one of my postdocs has developed a formal specification language that has primitives built in to enable us to describe these type of systems and then generates Java code. We've been looking at autonomic computing, how we can protect the system both in the short term, which is the fight or flight or the sympathetic nervous system, and the long term, the rest and digest, how we can ensure that this type of mission is kept safe in the long term and viable in the long term. I'll skip this slide. Basically just says that we're using concepts from the idea of heartbeats and pulse beats so we can indicate that the system is functioning at the level that we want it to. We've been using software product lines. I already mentioned to you how we would self-protect during a solar storm, which here is the part of the system in red. And of course, as we use it in other environments, the rings of Saturn on the surface of Mars or the surface of the moon, this role has changed. So again, machine learning could be used to bring in a different form of self-protection at that point. And we've been using automated code generation because if we can develop appropriate models of our requirements, we can generate code, we can extract models from our code, we can use the mathematical laws of concurrency to extract our requirements from the models, but then by reversing this, we can go round trip. So we can express what we want of the system as scenarios, generate appropriate models, and ultimately generate code, but we can go round trip so that we can constantly improve our system as we learn new ideas, new concepts, new situations. So we have to understand, of course, that everything we do on paper doesn't necessarily scale up. While we can design a paper airplane, that doesn't mean that everything there directly scales up to the largest software project in history. However, there's an awful lot that we can learn. So there's much that we can do, and machine learning has much possibilities in terms of improving what we understand about our environment, about our situation, and producing new results that will be very beneficial to us. So there are a number of things we have to ask ourselves about AI. Will AI really take over the world, and should we let it? Well, AI is making huge advances, and machine learning has been one of the areas of AI where the greatest advances have been happening. It would be very foolish not to take advantage of these and to improve our lives, our world, our environment to the best that we can. We have to be careful, though, about how much we let a system or a component of a system make decisions about future behavior. When it learns something, do we always automatically let it take the decisions that it wants, or do we have to constrain those in some ways? Well, I would say that for safety alone, we want to be able to constrain that. And of course, we want to be able to understand why some decisions have been made, and that's why people are concentrating lately on explainable AI, to explain why a certain decision might have been made, to explain why a certain behavior might have been learned. And that will give us confidence that the decisions being made are reasonable and sound. So when we do allow change, how do we know that we are preserving safety properties? Well, again, explainable AI is going to help that become a reality. And how much trust do we put into a system after it changes, after it learns something? Do we assume that everything it learns is valid and useful and helpful? Or do we have to be a little bit more skeptical about that? And do we need a little bit more convincing as to how it made that decision and how it learned that behavior? And people keep asking me, will robots take our jobs? And I keep telling them, absolutely robots will take our jobs, because robots are so much better at doing things than we are in that limited domain in which they work. So yes, just like automation took jobs from the 1800s onwards, robots will take jobs in the future, but they'll take the repetitive jobs, they'll take the unsafe jobs, they'll take the jobs that are better done in a mechanical way, but they'll also create lots of other jobs. And a number of reports are now saying that technology, AI, and machine learning will create more jobs than it takes away. It will take away the repetitive and boring jobs, but it'll create more high-powered, more important jobs. And that's why, of course, an IT career is so important to so many of us. But my good friend Roger Penrose says that we have to consider consciousness. He says it's not artificial intelligence if the system doesn't exhibit consciousness. So the system must know about itself, the system must have an understanding of reality. And the media, of course, are to blame for so much of what is actually automation is being called AI. And thankfully, machine learning is one of those parts of AI, or what people are calling AI, that truly is AI, because it is projecting on and understanding what has been done, what is there in patterns, and what can be predicted for the future. So again, remember that consciousness is an essential aspect to artificial intelligence, and we shouldn't mix artificial intelligence with what is simply automation. So a word of warning, do not trust robots, but don't forget that robots are very useful to us, as is all of AI and all of machine learning. I am sure that you'll have a truly excellent week this week in your 14 sessions. I'm sure you'll learn an awful lot about machine learning and AI in general, and I wish you a wonderful, wonderful week and great results at the end of it. And thank you again for asking me to join you this morning. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your knowledgeable talk.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Specifically, R&D updates, including ARN's concept mission and Walker working model. Meanwhile,
Okay.
I received a message from director, sir. He is busy with another important meeting with AKTU University officials, so he is unable to join. However, he put his message from his mobile, that is with blessings, words, and best wishes and best of luck, and have a trust on us for a good and ample learning FDP. Thank you, sir, for your
Thank you.
words, and surely fulfill
Thank you,
your
sir.
expectation. Once again, over
Thank
to
you.
Dr. Kanika.
Thank you.
Doc-
So we generally trust the robots. So by your line, we don't trust the robots now. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hinchey.
So in
Excellent.
the conclusory notes, now may I request everyone to please rise for the national anthem. Pragati, please.
So
Proceed.
everyone is requested to stand up on their positions if it is possible.
Ma'am, may I start?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay. जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंधु गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे जय
जय हिंद जय हिंद
Thank you, Pragati. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, in the inaugural for the 5 days FDP on ML. All the dignitaries, faculty members, and participants are joined before 10 minutes, starting of the session. And As of now, if you have any of the doubts of the sessions, you can contact Mr. Manish Sharma for any of your queries. So thank you everyone. You can join next technical session at 11:30.